So personal background, went to UC Berkeley, worked on 6 different startups. The most notable of which was Rotten Tomatoes. Working on another one now called Hobo Labs. It's a mobile gaming startup. And as far as fundraising goes, I've been like all over the place in terms of all over the spectrum as far as fundraising and bootstrapping. First company I was doing with my co-founder Lyle Fong, we were doing selling computer systems and components. We just put in our own money. It was self-funded, a couple thousand that we had in savings. Second company was a web design firm. For that one, I had another co-founder, Steven. The two of us, we basically just got a loan from family. We raised we borrowed $30,000 from my mom and his uncle. With Rotten Tomatoes, we raised $1 million from angels and one small VC. After we sold Rotten Tomatoes, I went to China, did a company there that was a little bit like a Yelp type of thing, raised $1.3 million from angels and family, which I don't recommend. Then went to Hong Kong, did a startup, a social network that was a little bit like MySpace, working with artists and celebrities, raised $500,000 from strategic angels, and then most recently did Hobo Labs, and we raised $4.6 million from 2 VCs and strategic angels, so kind of all over the spectrum. So for you guys who are first-time entrepreneurs, you just have an idea or prototype, and you're thinking about raising money, my advice is stop. Don't bother trying to raise money. Why? Because fundraising is a full-time job. It typically takes 3 to 6 months to raise money. And if you just have an idea, pretty much 99% of the people are going to be telling you no. On top of that, if you're spending all your time raising money, you're not working on the product. You're not trying to get traction. And so most likely, your product's going to remain unfinished in those 3 to 6 months, and you're not going to see any traction, any growth. And so what's going to happen is everyone's telling you no, you have flat growth. What most likely, you're going to end up quitting. You're going to say, oh, this is too hard. I'm not going to do it. And even if you decide to keep going, that time you spent raising money and not growing your company, like if you have flat growth, it makes it pretty much almost impossible to raise money. So you really want to show growth, especially early on when you start up. So what should you do instead? Bootstrap. So the goal of bootstrapping is to keep your costs as low as possible. So one way you can do that is don't take salary, or take the absolute minimum to survive, or have a job and work on this idea on nights and weekends. I don't totally recommend it, but it's one way to do it. Don't get an office space. Don't worry about legal, finance, patents, any of that stuff. The reason why is if the idea doesn't work, all that money and time is wasted. So save on that. Just focus on the idea instead. One thing to remember is you can always cut your costs if you're trying to get to like a break-even level, but it's very hard early on to increase your revenue. So one story from when we were doing Rotten Tomatoes, we raised $1 million, but this was back in January 2000. 2 months later, the market crashed. The bubble burst. It was really bad back then. We were doing our design firm. We actually gave our design firm to another company to take over when we raised money, and we transferred 20-something people over to work on Rotten Tomatoes. After the market crashed, we knew like we had to cut costs. We knew it wasn't going to be easy to raise our revenue up at that early stage. So we went from 20-something people down to 21 to 17 to 14 to 11 to 7 people, all in the course of 1.5 years. And even when we went to 7 people, we all had to take at least a 30% pay cut. 2 of us, myself and one of the guys, Paul, we went to 0 salary. And the way I did that was I looked at my fixed costs and I was like, well, rent is the biggest cost. So I stayed in the office, like living under a desk for 6 months in order to keep the cost as low as possible. So it is possible. Another thing you can do to keep your costs down is get technical. So if any of you guys are actually coders and can build whatever your idea is yourself, like that's the best case scenario. Otherwise, if you can't, you should either learn or recruit a technical co-founder. Because if you don't, like I'll see a lot of startups or people who are trying to start up, and they're marketing biz dev people, and they have no technical co-founders. What they end up doing is they end up hiring contractors. Problem with hiring contractors is it's kind of a waste of time and money. Like you have to explain your idea to them. They don't totally get it. You don't even totally know what it is yourself. They build something for you. Usually they have other customers, so they don't necessarily do the best job. And then whenever you do a tech startup, like you need to iterate quickly. You need to keep changing up the idea, test this, test that. It's hard to do that with contractors. You're going to have to like re-explain the idea to them. The turnaround time, like ideally you want it like within hours or days. They might take weeks. And every time you make a change, you got to like pay the money again. So ideally, you either do it yourself or you find a technical co-founder. And if you don't have one, admittedly, it's very hard to do it at an early stage. It's probably as hard or harder than fundraising. What I would recommend is for those of you that are like recently out of school, college is probably the best place to find a technical co-founder or any co-founder. So for those of you that are recently out of school, maybe go back to your college contacts and see if you have any friends who are technical that might be interested in whatever idea you're thinking about pursuing. The third thing is keep it simple. So I'm pretty sure all of you have heard of like MVP, minimum viable product. But that is a really good concept to be thinking about when you're trying to keep your costs down, is do the absolute minimum it takes to kind of see if your idea is viable. So one good example is Idea Labs. It's like the original accelerator incubator kind of thing. They wanted to find out way back when was like if people were willing to buy cars online. So what did they do? They built a website to sell cars. They had no back-end infrastructure at the time. They didn't have any inventory of cars. They didn't have any way to like really easily get the car to someone. They just put the website up to see if people would buy it. When people bought a car, they would just call up like a local dealership and just arrange to have it shipped. I mean, they were eating probably a couple $100 in losses every time someone did that. But they could find it. They didn't need to sell that many to find out like, hey, people are actually willing to buy cars online, sight unseen. So as an example, what you could possibly do for your ideal product is make a website, make a mailing list. You know, if you're interested in this idea, you know, or product is coming soon, sign up. Then buy like Facebook ads, Google ads, and see if people actually click over. And if they click over, do they sign up? I mean, that will help you figure out if there's demand or not. Another way is if you're doing hardware, think about Kickstarter. You know, make a video, see if people actually fund it. If they do, then build it. If they don't, you know that there's not necessarily demand. So in addition to bootstrapping, you need to focus. So the goal of focusing is to keep your time as short as possible. One way you can do this, cut out busy work. So there are many ways to be busy working on your company. For example, answering email, researching, customer interviews, fundraising, PowerPoint presentations, business plans, finding office space, setting up legal or finance, working on patents. Like all of that is a waste of time. Like all that matters is focus on getting traction. All that other stuff is like, it's keeping you busy. It is kind of related to doing the company, but it's not telling you anything. You're not knowing if you're actually going to have something that works or not. And specifically, I want to go into researching a little bit because one thing that most first-time entrepreneurs, a mistake they all make is they over-research. I generally say, don't spend more than 1 week researching your idea. Ideally, no more than 2 days. With Google, in an hour, you can probably find most of your competitors. And the reason why is because if you spend too much time researching, generally you're going to convince yourself not to do the company. Because you research whatever idea you have, someone probably has already made it, like 80% the same, probably 95% the same idea. And for the most part, these competitors are going to fall into one of two camps. Either they're huge, and you're going to look at them and you're like, well, they're so big, like I don't want to compete against them, I give up. Or they're small and they're failing or dead, in which case you're like, well, they just did my idea, it didn't work, so I give up. And so if you think too much and you research too much, you just end up convincing yourself not to do it. So look at two examples of look at Google. So for instance, they could have said, hey, look at Yahoo at the time when they launched, look how big they are. Or look at Excite, oh, they're dead. Or in another example, look at Facebook. They could have said, look at MySpace, look how big MySpace is when they did it. Or look at Friendster, Friendster's dead. Either way, they could convince themselves not to do it, but they just went out and did it. They probably did little to no research. Let's see. So traction, when you're focusing, traction is the only thing that matters. Typically, I think of it in three ways you can kind of get traction. One is traffic. So how many users are using your app, going to your website, et cetera? Like how many installs, how many page views, how many monthly uniques. The second is kind of engagement. Like how engaged are your users with your product? Like how much time are they spending on it? How often are they coming back? The third is revenue. How much money are you making? You pretty much only need one to actually go just even on a line, and you'll probably eventually be able to raise money for your product. If it hockey sticks, it's like pretty much definite you're going to raise money. If you can get 2 things going, great. If you get all 3, perfect. But you really only need 1. And generally, of the 3, revenue is probably the hardest one to get early. And engagement and traffic are among the easier ones of the 3. But none of them are easy. The third thing is to figure out the single most important metric for your business when you're focusing. So as an example, if you're a marketplace, you have buyers and you have sellers, what's the most important metric? It's transactions. It's not the number of buyers or the number of sellers, it's actually how many times do they transact, right? Because like, imagine if you're a dating site and you had 1 million guys in one city and 1 million girls in another city, and you actually had no dates. It didn't matter that you had 1 million on each side. It matters on how many dates are you getting. So once you have the most important metric, you should spend all your time trying to get that metric, that number up, right? You should set a goal where it's like, if we can get this metric to some level, we think we can raise money at this point. That should be your goal. And then you just set goal, like milestones going to that goal. So for example, if you're saying it's transactions and you're like, at 1,000 transactions per day, we're pretty sure we can raise money. Then you might say, okay, within 6 months, we want to get to 1,000. So within 1 month, we might do 10 per day. By month 3, we want to get to 100 per day. By month 6, we want to get to 1,000 a day. The reason why I think traction is so important is, in my opinion, numbers beat everything. Like you'll see a lot of times, you'll see panels where they have VCs and angel investors, and they're like, oh, what's more important, market, team, idea, blah, blah, and they'll be like, team, right? Usually that's what they say. I actually would disagree. I think numbers are better than anything. It's better than a good team, a good idea, a good technology, a good presentation, market size, business plan, pitch, patents, whatever. Numbers, if you have the numbers, you will get funding. And numbers basically reduce the risk the most for investors. So let's assume that you have the numbers. What's next? Fundraising. So when do you fundraise? So if you're focusing, it shouldn't take that long. Like you look at Y Combinator, you look at 500 startups, they're 3-month programs. Yes, they're working on their pitch during that time, but really when you see their pitches, most of them are about their traction, about the numbers. They're like, hey, we had this week-over-week growth, or this month-over-month growth, or this many installs, or this much revenue. So if you're focused, if it only takes them 3 months, within 3 to 6 months, you should know. And if you notice, that's the same amount of time that normally you would need to spend fundraising. So instead of fundraising, use that time to actually focus and get traction. If you bootstrap, you don't need that much money. So if we do some quick math, 6 months of rent, $3,000 a month, $18,000. 6 months of food, say $10 a day, go to Costco, $1,800, that's $20K. $20K you can pretty much figure out in 6 months what you're doing. So if you can show strong growth, then you can fundraise. If your growth is flat, think about pivoting, try a new idea. So how to fundraise? I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this part, but 3 things. 1, develop your network. So you kind of want to build it up a little bit before you're actually ready to fundraise. So you kind of still want to spend a little bit of time, like maybe going to mixers or kind of reaching out to folks. First time you meet someone who might be an angel investor, don't ask for money. Like develop a relationship with them, get advice instead. Like it's a huge turnoff if you're like, hey, here's my idea, let's invest in it. Wait till you have traction. Like develop a relationship and then wait till you have traction. Once you have traction, then work on your network. Like work on actually raising money. Second thing is time your attack. So you want to try and get it so once you have traction and once you have a network of potential investors, set up your pitches close together, create a sense of urgency. Number 3 is find a lead. So ideally it should be the person who's your most strategic investor, and hopefully you have a good relationship with them. Once you get one lead investor in, it makes it much easier to get the others, especially if you have the numbers. So one analogy I want to kind of use to kind of frame everything I just said is poker. So running a startup is a lot like poker. Poker is a game of luck and skill. So luck, the cards are random. What cards you get is random. Skill is how you play those cards, play your hand is skill. And if you look generally over time, the best players kind of win consistently over time. Any particular given match, they might not do as well, but over time you'll see the good players do better. So when you think about startups as poker, on the luck side, your ideas are essentially random. For instance, if I came to you with Twitter or Snapchat or Airbnb or like almost any of these ideas, or Rotten Tomatoes, before they actually got big, how many of you guys could have been like, yeah, that's for sure good? I don't think any of you, or very few of you, would have been able to do it. And if you asked the founders at the time when they came up with the idea, if they thought they were going to be huge, they probably couldn't tell you for sure that they're going to be anywhere near as big as they got. So ideas are, for consumer-facing companies, ideas are pretty much random. And so think about your idea as your starting hand. Then on the skill side, how you execute on your idea makes a humongous difference, right? Again, look at search engines. Look at Friendster versus MySpace versus Facebook. Look at Excite versus Yahoo versus Google. It makes a difference. So when you have this framework of startups as poker with the idea as your starting hand, then you can kind of look at some poker strategy and think about how that applies to running your startup. So typically, there's 4 types of poker players. And then on one side, there's what they call like tight versus loose players. So a tight player is they'll keep folding and folding and folding until they get a good hand, and then they'll play. A loose player, every hand looks like a good hand, like they'll play everything. Then as far as their kind of style of betting, you have passive players and you have aggressive players. So a passive player is like, okay, I'm going to play, and I'll just check. Or if someone bets against me, I'll just call it. An aggressive player is like, oh, I'm going to play, I'm going to bet. If someone bets against me, I'm going to raise them. All right? So if you take that and make like a little 2x2 matrix, you basically get 4 types. You get a tight passive player, you get a tight aggressive player, you get a loose passive player, and you get a loose aggressive player. So for first-time entrepreneurs, or generally I think for most entrepreneurs, what's the best strategy? It's tight aggressive. So that means they wait until they keep folding until they have a hand that's good, and then when they actually decide to play, they're betting and they're raising. They're being very aggressive. So how does that apply to entrepreneurs? Test your ideas quickly and cheaply, i.e. bootstrap and focus. Fold immediately if it doesn't work, meaning pivot, try a new idea. It doesn't have to be a completely new idea. It could be, this is the same base idea, but I'm trying 1 or 2 little changes each time until I see if maybe something else works. Different market, different platform, et cetera. And once you have something that works, then think about raising money and thinking about being really aggressive. Because what happens typically is people are like, here's my idea, I have a prototype. They try and raise money. They can't really raise it, or they raise it from friends and family. They don't raise a lot. A lot of times it's like 100K, 200K. And then they can't really, they're raising for something that they don't actually know works because it's just an idea or prototype. They spend that 200K. They made little to no progress because it wasn't ever validated. And that's it, they're done, right? Instead, keep messing around until you have an idea that works, and then raise real money. If you actually have numbers, I mean, raising 500 or 1 million should be relatively easy. And then you can actually really execute because you already kind of proven that there's a need for it. So in summary, bootstrap, i.e. keep your costs as low as possible. Focus, keep your time as short as possible. Work on getting traction. Once you have traction, then think about fundraising. That's it. So,
I think we have time for a couple questions.
yeah,
if
sure.
You're willing to take some.
2 questions. 1, what type of poker player are you? And 2, what motivates you starting Hobo Labs? It's a different vertical than the other ones that you've been successful at.
Right. As far as poker, I'm actually not really a great poker player. I realized I'm more of a tight passive player, and so when I actually have a hand I want to play, I tend to not be aggressive enough. And even I would say when we did Rotten Tomatoes, we were a little bit not aggressive enough. We actually had something that worked, and I think we could have been a little bit more aggressive with it. As far as Hobo Labs, Rotten Tomatoes, it was movie reviews. It was kind of entertainment related. The one I did in Hong Kong, it was working with artists and celebrities. This one is mobile gaming. I've always kind of had an interest in things related to entertainment, but the common theme of all 6 companies I've done is they've all been with friends from college. So Lyle, he was the guy who was supposed to speak today. I did my first company and my 6th company with him. Number 2, 3, 4, 5, I did with my friend Steven. Except he ended up getting married to someone in China, so he's still over there. So a lot of times for me, it was like, do something I think is interesting, do it with friends. And that was actually kind of more my goal for those companies. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering, when did you study accounting?
I started EECS, electrical engineering, computer science. I switched to computer science. I switched to business. My parents were like, don't do business. It's a major about nothing. Then I ended up leaving school with Lyle and 2 other friends to go and do our first company. And then, so I did 2 years of school, left school with them, and then over the next 10 years, I finished the remaining 2 years. So after we sold Rotten Tomatoes, I was taking like summer classes here and there, and eventually it took me another 10 years to graduate. So it took me 12 years overall. And I ended up as cognitive science because I think the classes I had taken up to that point, like Cog Sci was the one that was like the closest I could, like the fastest I could graduate using that one. And I haven't really used it, but I think
I
college.
thought that was a really good story. It's like, man, he's a cognitive scientist.
Yeah.
He's got all these startups, but now you.
I don't really use Cog Sci for it, but I think college was useful, one, to find co-founders. All my co-founders were from Cal. And 2, it's like a way to kind of learn about studying and learn about yourself going through that process. Because it's like, for me, I mean, I grew up in Maryland, so coming out here, it's like you're away from family, and you kind of have to learn to set your own schedules and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you weren't being aggressive enough with Rotten Tomatoes. So I was wondering if there's kind of a good way to tell when it's time to stop bootstrapping and start looking for money.
I mean, we raised, like, with Rotten Tomatoes, my co-founder Sen, he was actually our creative director for our design firm, and he came up with the idea on the side. He was just a big movie buff. He wanted to see what reviews were out for this movie Rush Hour. So while he was looking for all the reviews everyone was saying, because he was a big Jackie Chan fan, he made a page that kind of had it all. And it started getting some traffic almost immediately. After about a year, we're like, and we were hosting it, we're like, hey, maybe this might make sense. We actually kind of talked to some of the angel investors and VCs that we kind of were already working with as a design firm, and we had a couple different ideas, but they're like, no, do Rotten Tomatoes, that one makes the most sense. So we raised money for that. As far as being passive, I think part of it was the market crashed so badly after we raised money, like ridiculously badly. Like almost, we had identified 100 competitors. I think like 90% of them went out of business within a year because of the market crash. Like when it crashed, it was a bubble back then, because there's all these companies that didn't have real revenue. They had traffic, but they were just buying. They were going public or raising a lot of money to buy eyeballs from other websites to get traffic, to then raise more money, to then IPO. All that money was basically just going around in a circle. They were just buying from each other. When the market crashed, no one could raise any more money. No one could spend money to buy eyeballs from each other. So everyone's revenue also crashed, and it just kind of went in the circle, and almost everyone went out of business. The other thing was when the market got a little bit better, a year and a half after the crash was 9/11, and if you were like advertising based, pretty much right around that happened, I mean, for like half a year to a year, it took, like anyone who was reliant on ad revenue took a big hit, because no one wants to do commercials and run ads after such a tragic event. So I think that kind of made us more passive than maybe otherwise. Before 2000, things were pretty hot. Now, things are pretty hot, but we were kind of in this weird spot. But I do look back, and I'm like, when we actually had the chance, people approached us to sell, our bar was like, we're not selling unless we can make our investors their money back. That was our only bar, which was maybe too low when we look back. But once we started getting offers above that, we were like, yeah, we could probably keep doing this, and it is growing, but maybe we can only get it to like double the value and traffic and blah, blah, blah. And we didn't think back then about like, what, if we were more ambitious, what could we have done with it? Like, we could have been more aggressive in trying to do like IMDb. We could have been like, go to mobile and Facebook and stuff and be like Flickster, which eventually actually bought us. Like we sold to IGN, IGN sold to News Corp, News Corp sold to Flickster, and then Flickster sold to Warner Brothers, so Warner Brothers owns it now. We could have gone into like digital, streaming, like Netflix. Because at the time, Netflix was still doing DVDs, and we were like, we don't want to do that. But if we thought a little bit further and be like, oh, well, digital might make sense, that's something we could have done without having to deal with inventory. So I think those are things that we could have done better, but we were looking at it, and we had done it for 5 years up to that point, and you kind of like, it's hard to think outside the box, and we had built this box around us. It might have been better to even bring in someone new who could actually try out new, different ideas. So, yeah.
This is a little off topic, but you said back in 2000, there were companies buying companies for eyeballs. Do you think it's happening right now too, with Facebook buying like Instagram and WhatsApp for eyeballs? Is already the same kind of thing? What are your experiences?
I think now, in my opinion, it's a little different, because back then a lot of the revenue was coming from other web companies. They were just buying eyeballs from each other. But now it's like there's actually revenue generated for a lot of companies. Like in the beginning, they're just trying to get users, but a lot of those users are coming virally. Like it wasn't that Facebook bought all those users in the beginning, or WhatsApp. or Instagram. You know, they're coming naturally, and also when they do generate revenue, they're generating it from users directly. You know, especially things like Airbnb and Uber. You know, and so that money, it's like real money. It's not like this fake money that's getting passed around. So I would say it's, in my opinion, it's a bit different. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, yep.
You talked about the traction. Do you have any quick thought on how do you get that flywheel going in the context of the marketplace example? Because that's the hardest part in the early stage of the startup, especially when you're bootstrapping, you're trying to get that flywheel going from a traction standpoint.
One really good blog that all of you guys should read is this guy, Andrew Chen. He blogs specifically about like customer acquisition and traction and all these issues. Like if you're thinking about, if you're doing a web startup or a mobile startup or anything, just read his stuff. He's really good.
And he just moved to Oakland.
Oh, did he? Okay, I didn't know that. That's cool. On top of that, I would say marketplaces are probably the hardest ones to actually work. But if they work, they're also the strongest ones. They're the hardest ones to take down. I mean, look at eBay, look at Craigslist. I mean, any of you probably could make a better site as far as features than Craigslist in maybe a week, right? But it's not about the features. It's the fact that they have all the buyers and sellers. When you post up something, it sells like, especially in the Bay Area, it'll sell like in an hour or something. That's extremely hard to take down. And you'll see a lot of people who are like, oh, we're gonna make a better eBay. And it's like, how is it better? Oh, it has this feature, this feature, this feature. I'm like, well, how are you actually gonna get the users? They're like, well, we'll buy some Facebook ads. And be like, no, that's not gonna work, you know? Like you actually, what is your way of actually getting users? And so one thing that you can think about when you're when you're coming in with ideas, like maybe you have an idea that where the traction, like the way to get users is kind of built into the idea. So an example is like Skype. If you guys remember when they first started, Skype to Skype, well, it still is, but it was free. And so back then, long distance charges were like a real thing, right? And so if you downloaded Skype, you're almost definitely probably gonna tell like 10 people to be like, hey, download this thing so I can call you for free. So it's a spread that way. Like even WhatsApp, what is WhatsApp? Like Skype was a long distance replacement, like calling replacement. WhatsApp was an SMS replacement. So all these instant messaging apps, you know, people used to charge you what, 5 cents, 10 cents to send an SMS. Well, once you have Wi-Fi or some kind of connection, you can use WhatsApp instead and send as many messages as you want for free. So it's spread that way. Instant messaging apps are one of the few apps on your phone that you will ever actually share your contacts with, right? If some random app like, I have no idea, like some random app says, hey, can I access your contacts? You're gonna be like, no. But instant messaging, you will say yes. Or you look at YouTube. When they started, one thing that helped them grow was you could embed the video on your MySpace page or your Friendster page. And so you're like, hey, this is a cool video. You embed it, people see it, they see YouTube, and then they end up, you know, going onto YouTube and looking at videos from there. So all those things is kind of like built into it. So when you're thinking about something, think about how your idea actually could really build in the user acquisition right away. I mean, it could be as simple as just putting a watermark. So these guys kind of came and showed me their product. They had this like video kind of editing, creation kind of app on mobile. They had launched 6 months ago. They were at 600,000 users. They didn't spend any money acquiring those users. It's all organic. 400,000 monthly uniques. What they did was when people, if they didn't get the paid version, which you know most of the people did not, when they made the video, it would have a little watermark, and people would see the watermark and be like, "Oh, how'd you make it? Oh, it's this company." Then they go and download the app. So I would say these are ideas of things that you can think about. Was someone over? Yeah.
Yeah, I had sort of a follow-up question about what you said with the bubble. So do you think that there's sort of an app bubble growing right now that will burst in the future, near future?
App bubble. There is a lot of money going in there, but again, a lot of these companies are either generating a lot of money, like the game companies, for instance, or they're gaining a lot of users. And whether there's a bubble, I mean, I'm sure there are, you know, even in 2008, we had another bubble. Valuations are pretty high. There's a lot of money going around as well. It's possible. I don't believe there's going to be anything like 2000 for a while. Like that was really bad. But it's possible that there could be ups and downs. And that's part of luck is not just the idea, but there's also the timing. And kind of when you end up raising money or when you launch your thing, sometimes the market conditions can have a huge effect on that. For instance, YouTube was not the first online video site. There was ones before that. There was iFilm, there's a bunch of these guys. But they were all too early. The bandwidth wasn't there. You know, streaming music, even there's a point when that was even a little too early. Now it works. But back then, you couldn't do streaming video. So timing, the market conditions, other things play an effect. Someone over here, I think? No? Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you.